you talked about going into NBC when it wasn't very important, and then by the end it was the biggest thing. What about in terrestrial radio? Like,
Oh my God.
like that feels like an even bigger
Oh
chasm.
man. I mean, like when I started in Orlando, we like every like terrestrial radio hosts are very old school. And so it's very hard to take someone who's been doing something like the host in Orlando was like had been doing it for like 20 years or something. So like
Yeah.
most like hosts are like, I've been doing this forever. I care about my radio show. That's it. I'm not going to promote, this online streaming or like this, social media crap or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but that's what is going to grow your brand. And
Right.
it was very hard to change that mentality of like, we're not taking away from your terrestrial listeners. And terrestrial radio also was like, at the time, it was a diary system where people actually had to write down what they were listening to. And that's how they tested, like, they, could test how many people were listening to the radio station and give you ratings. Like, that's
Oh,
how they did ratings.
oh,
Was
the ratings was by diary.
literally at one, like in the beginning, it was called diary. And you had like a select group of people, and they actually had to write down, like, I'm listening to this radio station and this is what, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then it turned into, a more like, it was called PPM, and it was like kind of like a beeper system where like if it just like recognized if you were listening to the station.
Okay.
But so people just were like, that's all they cared about. And I had to kind of like change. I feel like my career has constantly been a battle for digital, like just
Wow.
like trying to get people to come on to the side of like, even when I moved to Nashville, it was like 2011, and I still had to fight with the host because I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
guys, like, I will say, to give credit to Bobby, he was one of maybe the first morning show hosts that was like on the same page with me on digital and
Yeah.
understood the importance of it and understood the importance of social media. And I was like, hell yeah, So I think like in that case, like, yeah, it was really hard in terrestrial radio to be like, hey guys, like, I'm not trying to take away from your listeners on air. We're going to like, it's a system that kind of comes back to it, right? You're
Right.
just kind of feeding, like you're taking from one bucket to another bucket and back to that bucket.
Yeah.
And it's like people just couldn't really grasp that concept.
Yeah, I mean, there's this definite fear of the unknown. Digital is not scary unless you don't know anything about it, and then do you think it's a one or the other, as opposed to an omni-channel. People are watching television and they're tweeting about the show that they're watching, and they're right. I mean, and they're on IG Live commentating about the show they're watching. Just sort of,
it's a spider web.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's kind of how I always, even though I'm deathly afraid of spiders, that's kind of how I explained it. Was like it all kind of webs back to content, right? Like that's the most important thing is what you're doing, the content, and then it all just kind of exactly what you're doing here. You know what I mean? Like this is going live on Twitch and on Facebook and on YouTube and on Twitter. And it's like, that's not to, discredit or take away from what we're doing right here.
right.
It's pushing it everywhere to give more people, access to it.
Yes.